Hello and welcome to this tutorial where I'm going to show you guys and girls we package something from InDesign, and specifically InDesign, but it's basically Adobe. And packaging is when we can take everything that we've used, literally placed or whatever, into any software that Adobe has now pretty much. And we can collect all that into a single folder. So if I have to transfer that folder in some sort of capacity to another artist or a printer or something like that, I can, using the packaging feature. So to kind of explain a little bit about it, I have some images. The background and the logos here are all placed images. So they are called links, meaning that they're files created outside of InDesign. And then I have some elements that are like here and here that are fonts that I've used. They are not graphics, so they are editable fonts. And if I want to collect all this information and transfer it to somebody easily, then I can do that with the packaging feature. And again, this works anytime you use fonts and anytime you file and place something into Illustrator, InDesign, whatever. So we go to File and we scroll down to Package. This dialog box is usually pretty important. Summary, if you see an exclamation point, you'll see like a yellow triangle with an exclamation point in here. You should look at that. And because it's telling you, or InDesign is telling you, Adobe is telling you that there may be issues. More often than not, it's with links, links that are missing. You move them since you placed this file, or the links are in the wrong color space. Like you see right here, none of them use RGB because this is going to be printed. Then they have to be CMYK. So if you see an exclamation point, you should probably, kind of read it. Fonts gets a little trickier. We'll talk about that in a second. But if there's no other errors, then we just go ahead and click packaging. And yes, we'll go ahead and save it. We'll save this. And then this is where it's going to collect it. I'm just putting it on my desktop for now, but you'll see a lot of these, most of these will be by default checked. And as I said, we're going to come into fonts a little bit in a second. So this is one of the more important ones that you need checked, so that it collects any fonts that you use. So there's no question. Sometimes it comes up, what font did you use for that? Or I don't have that font on my system. If you collect the font, then it'll put it in a folder with marked fonts that will then tell you that's what font you used. Of course, copying any linked images. So I wanted to collect all of these files, all that I used, placed images, photos, or graphics, or whatever. And of course, my InDesign file, and then also a PDF in case we need to print it. So we'll come back to fonts in a second, but right now we're just going to check it by default. And the reason I want to circle back to fonts is because Adobe does something kind of interesting now with a collection of fonts. So I'm going to click Package, and it creates my file. And let me share my desktop for you. And so now you can see, here's my file folder. And if I open the file folder, with that folder collected, it will collect all the graphics and images that I've used, my InDesign file, my PDF, and my fonts that I used. Let's go back to share InDesign for a second. All right. So what InDesign in Adobe does now is, if the font is owned, or I should say licensed by Adobe, then it won't collect the fonts, because Adobe says, hey, we have those fonts, you don't need to collect them. So sometimes if you go through the packaging feature and you check that box, so if I go through package again, package, sometimes you may check this box, and then when you open your file up, nothing will be in there. Fonts folder, I should say, won't be in there. That only happens really if the box is unchecked or if you used a font that Adobe already has a license for. So if I open up InDesign right here, by default, I have Minion, but if I want to change that font and I click on it, I have other fonts available to me. Those are all licensed through Adobe. If I click on the Find More feature, that I can scroll through and find a lot more fonts that Adobe has access to. If Adobe has a license for it, if you used a font through Adobe, then it may not collect it even if the box is checked. Because in Adobe's mind, if it's their font, then their feature is it doesn't need to collect it because it's universal to everybody. Everybody has access to the Adobe fonts. And so you may not see that font folder even if you've checked it. So if you don't see the font folder, you used fonts through Adobe, through the default, through the software, or you explored and found more, then it may not collect as a fonts folder. What that also means is that if it doesn't collect it and you send the InDesign file to somebody, if they open it up, it will, because it's an Adobe font, it will automatically open the font. So as you can see here, activate Adobe fonts instantly, meaning that even if it didn't collect in a folder, if you used an Adobe font and they open up that file, then it will open it up automatically because Adobe shares with Adobe. In some instances, if the font is unlicensed, meaning that you got it in an illegal manner, it won't collect it into a fonts folder. And if it's a free font, like say from DaFont or something like that, it may not collect it because it doesn't recognize it. However, there's two ways around that. If it's a free font or an illegal font and you want to include it, then there's two ways that you can do that. Way number one is if the font is installed in your system, meaning you literally dragged it into your system folder's font folder. So let's go to package, save it. If it's installed in your system on your computer, then it will, if you have this folder collected, it will package it. So if I go to package it again, and then let's share my Finder folder with you, desktop. Then you can see the fonts are installed in my system. This particular font, Tree Frog, is a free font that I got. So, but I've installed it on my computer's system folder for its fonts. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So that's why Adobe collected it. It's installed in my fonts folder. So there is a way around it that if you use fonts that aren't Adobe fonts, if you install them in your fonts folder, then it will collect it, as you can see here when you check the box. If you didn't install it on your fonts folder, then that means you have to manually just drag whatever the file is and wherever it's located at into a folder that you create. So as you can see here, my system folder for the computer under users, I'm on a Mac, but wherever your system folder is for your fonts, you can see that the font is activated on my system and it will copy it over to it. But if you don't have it installed in your system and instead you have it like, I don't know, as just a downloaded zip file or something like that, or on a travel drive or something like that, then that means you have to manually copy it into your packaged folder. So here's my packaged folder. It would mean I would literally create a folder that said fonts and I would literally drag it in there. So there are ways around it if it doesn't collect your fonts. So if it's an Adobe font, you don't necessarily need to panic if it doesn't create a font folder for you. It means that you used Adobe fonts, so it will activate it. Best practices, though, is that you still want to collect the fonts in some sort of capacity so that at bare minimum, if you can remember what fonts you used, or if the font moved or something like that, and InDesign alerts you that the font isn't active in your system, you'll know what font it is and you can activate it. So best practices is that if it doesn't collect the font, you should still, if it's a free font or a non-licensed font, just create a folder in the package folder and either manually copy them over into the folder for you. So Adobe fonts, it's okay. And even if it doesn't collect it, you know, just check the box so that it will collect it. Okay. And so that's how we go through the new packaging features in Adobe InDesign, specifically with how we wrestle fonts now.